At 03:09 a.m., the night was still over western Russia, the air heavy with a strange, waiting silence. Inside a radar outpost near Belgorod, operators sat under the pale wash of fluorescent light, tracing green lines across fading screens. Cigarettes burned to ash beside coffee mugs as the hum of machinery filled the room like a lullaby. Static flickered across one monitor, faint but rhythmic. Probably interference, one technician muttered, unaware that what he saw wasn't random noise, it was deception. Miles away, Ukrainian cyber units had just breached the perimeter, injecting false echoes to blind the radar's eyes. In the underground control center beneath Odessa, a different kind of hum began, the synchronized pulse of activation. Dozens of monitors came alive, each showing coordinates, elevation, and flight trajectories. "Swarm protocol engaged," said a calm voice as the lights dimmed, and 78 Kamikaze drones armed in silence. Hydraulic doors opened one by one, letting the sea air rush in as steel wings extended. Engines whispered at Mach 0.7, their red beacons blinking once before fading into fog. The command was simple, cold, and absolute. Launch. The first wave tore through the mist like arrows of light. Beneath their flight paths, the Black Sea glimmered under the moon, still unaware, beautiful. Each drone carried 120 kilograms of explosive payload, programmed to strike within 3 meters of deviation. They flew low, just 60 meters above the surface, invisible to radar. The ocean's reflection cloaked them, turning each drone into a ghost of its own shadow. From afar, the formation looked like a silver crescent curving toward destiny. In Odessa's bunker, screens filled with data streams as Ukrainian operators tracked their creation. Their encrypted mesh network pulsed with blue light, heartbeat fast. On the main display, a red marker glowed. Engels Air Fortress, Russia's crown jewel. Valued at $4.1 billion inside Engels, soldiers slept beside their aircraft, the hangars echoing with the faint creak of cooling engines. The 295 MS Bears rested like beasts at rest, their bomb bays heavy with silence. The only movement came from a stray cat brushing against a landing gear, its fur glinting in the dim light. Far above, the first drone shifted course, using star calibration to lock its trajectory. The sky was clear, the wind perfect, and in that moment, Ukraine's engineers held their breath. "Impact in 60 seconds, someone whispered through the comms. The explosion was sudden and merciless. Fire erupted from the northern hangar as a fuel line ignited, sending shockwaves that shattered glass across the base. The night turned into day for 10 blinding seconds as a 295's tail lifted, twisted, and fell, burning into the asphalt. Before the echoes faded, 6 more drones arrived. They came in perfect formation, diving at steep angles, striking radar domes and command towers. Every hit sent ripples through the ground. Every flash carved fear into the horizon. Within a minute, the control tower collapsed. Flames rolled down the runway like molten wind, painting everything orange and black. 7 bombers were crippled, 2 destroyed, 16 lives gone before anyone could reach the alarm. In Kiev, the live infrared feed showed red blossoms spreading across the screen. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then a single voice said, "Confirmed. Target neutralized." In that silence, an entire nation exhaled the air it had been holding since the war began, but in Moscow, disbelief turned to rage. The Defense Control Center flickered with red alarms as generals crowded around flickering monitors. "How did they reach Engels?" Someone shouted, but there was no answer, only silence and the distant hiss of static. Orders spread like wildfire. Across the western military district, S-400 missile batteries rotated toward the sky. Launchers lifted, locked, and fired in quick succession, sending Mach 8 interceptors screaming into the clouds. Each missile cost over $1 million, chasing enemies that cost less than a car. Yet most found nothing, their sensors confused by a sky filled with ghosts. Ukraine's cyber interference had multiplied false targets until radar itself became the enemy. Control rooms erupted in panic as numbers jumped and vanished. Operators screamed coordinates that no longer existed, their consoles flooded with echoes. For 4 long seconds, the radar screens went completely black. That blackout was all the swarm needed. 30 drones slipped through untouched, flying low and fast toward their secondary objectives. The rest fell, intercepted mid-air, their debris raining harmlessly into empty fields. Over Kaluga, 1 missile struck a decoy, detonating too early. The blast illuminated another drone flying below it, which disintegrated instantly, but the shockwave also crippled a nearby radar station. In one flash, Russia's defense began to eat itself. Back at Engels, firefighters struggled against walls of heat, their suits melting under the inferno. Jet fuel streamed into trenches like rivers of flame, painting the sky in columns of smoke. Even from 30 miles away, villagers saw the horizon glowing red, the air trembling with aftershock. Ukrainian commanders watched through satellite feeds, their faces lit by the reflection of the burning base. "Engels is out," said a young analyst, almost whispering. "We did it." For the first time in months, there was a quiet triumph, wordless, heavy, and real. They hadn't just survived. They had struck deep into the enemy's shield. Somewhere, amid the static and silence, history had shifted by a fraction. But Russia was not done. In the frozen command rooms of Moscow, retaliation plans unfolded like blueprints of vengeance. The Iron Sky defense system came online, and with it, a storm neither side could yet imagine. The Iron Sky defense network came alive like a sleeping titan awakened in fury. In seconds, dozens of radar arrays along Russia's western front rotated in synchronization, feeding targeting data to batteries spread from Bryansk to Kursk. The night that had belonged to the drones was now pierced by columns of rising fire, missiles lifting, roaring, clawing their way into the darkness like predators chasing shadows. Each S-400 interceptor launched at Mach 8, a $1.2 million spear of steel and flame. Their contrails twisted and vanished, cutting through the fog in streaks of blue-white light. The sound reached the ground a full second later, a rolling thunder that rattled windows from Moscow to Voronezh. Russian command posts erupted into motion. Officers shouted into headsets, eyes wide over radar maps that glitched and stuttered from ongoing cyber interference. The Ukrainian malware, Spectre, had already begun rewriting data pathways, making friend appear as foe and ghost as target. The battlefield itself was turning into a hallucination. In Odessa's underground nerve center, Ukrainian operators watched the counterfire unfold in real time. Their screens filled with chaotic telemetry, hundreds of interceptors swarming upward, most missing entirely. "Iron Sky is blind," said one engineer, voice steady, fingers never leaving the console. "Keep them guessing." Outside, the surviving drones adjusted their altitude automatically, descending from 60 meters to barely 30 above the tree line. They skimmed the fields, clipping frost and fence posts as they roared inland toward Kaluga and Ryazan. Machine vision algorithms painted each target in infrared red, the radar relay stations that fed the Russian air. Defense grid, a burst of static filled the Russian command center. As one of those stations blinked out, then another, then three more. On satellite feeds, white plumes bloomed across the countryside, small but deliberate, like surgical wounds in the body of the empire. One general slammed his fist against the table. "They're cutting the eyes out of our system!" For the first time, Ukraine's cyber and air units moved in perfect tandem. Each strike opened another blind corridor in Russia's defenses, and each blind corridor allowed the next drone to slip through untouched. The pattern looked random to the enemy, but to Ukrainian strategists it was music. Mathematical rhythm woven in fire and signal. Then, without warning, one drone feed went dark. Another followed. Within moments, 12 blips vanished from the tactical screen. "We're jammed," said the operator. Russian electronic warfare units had finally caught the signal frequency, flooding the air with counterwaves. The remaining drones were now flying blind. Even blind, they did not stop. The swarm's onboard AI recalibrated using terrain memory and inertial guidance, trusting the map stored deep in silicon. Over Ryazan, the lead drone burst from the tree line and ascended to 100 meters. Ahead lay the early warning radar complex, a vast rotating dish glowing faintly in moonlight. It dove straight into it, and the explosion folded the radar dish like paper. Inside Moscow, alarms blared again, each one sharper, more desperate. "We're losing Kaluga feed, sir," shouted a lieutenant. "Satellite link failing!" Servers overheated as data rerouted through compromised channels, their casings glowing red from the strain. On one screen, a message appeared in plain Cyrillic text: "The sky is no longer yours." By dawn, 35 of 78 Ukrainian drones had hit their marks. The rest were lost to the sky, some intercepted, others self-destructed after completing their runs. Engels was crippled, Kaluga radar offline, and Sevastopol docks in chaos. The Black Sea Fleet had suffered 2 vessel losses overnight, both from naval drone strikes that turned the water to flame. But victory was never clean. At 06:14 a.m., Russian bombers answered back. 12 Tu-22M3 aircraft took off from Shaikovka Air Base, each armed with Kh-22 cruise missiles. Their targets Odessa, Dnipro, and the Mykolaiv industrial belt. As they climbed, contrails gleamed in the rising sun, white ribbons against a bleeding dawn. Ukraine's early warning teams had minutes to react. "Inbound confirmed," said a voice over encrypted line. In underground shelters, intercept crews loaded Patriot and Iris-T missiles, the launch tubes trembling with readiness. Outside, civilians woke to sirens and the deep metallic groan of a city preparing to endure. The first Russian missile struck an industrial zone on Odessa's outskirts, tearing open a fuel depot. Fire climbed 20 stories high, turning the morning into molten gold. But 9 others never reached their mark, intercepted mid-air. Shredded by Ukrainian defense in a spectacle of precision and luck, in Dnipro, one missile slipped through and hit an empty logistics center, collapsing it like a cardboard box. The blast wave shattered windows across 3 blocks but caused no fatalities. A miracle, reporters would later call it, though the soldiers knew it was more than luck. It was adaptation. And yet before the fires were out, Ukraine launched again. 42 drones refitted overnight with salvaged parts took to the air from hidden sites along the southern coast. This new swarm flew smarter, each drone guided not by human hands but by predictive AI that learned from the first wave's mistakes. They moved faster, lower, deadlier. Their destination was not a base this time. It was the radar hub in central Russia, near Kaluga. That single installation controlled over a third of the country's aerial surveillance network. If it fell, the sky above Moscow would turn blind. And as dawn spilled over the horizon, the swarm crossed the border undetected. The first drone hit at 07:02 a.m., followed by 5 more in tight succession. The radar dome imploded in a blossom of orange and silver, its skeleton collapsing inward like a dying lung. Electric arcs danced across broken circuits, sending sparks through the snow. Within minutes, communication with half the western grid was lost. In Moscow, power flickered. Civilian radio networks went silent for 30 seconds. The eerie quiet was worse than the explosions, a reminder that war was now fought in wavelengths, not trenches. One officer muttered under his breath, "We have lost the sky." At that same moment, Ukrainian technicians in Odessa cheered softly. No shouting, no celebration, just quiet relief. They had done what no modern army had accomplished, crippled a superior force using machines that cost less than a single tank tread. As the smoke cleared over Kaluga, the scale of destruction became clear. Craters pocked the earth like open mouths, the steel of radar masts twisted into blackened sculptures. A lone technician stumbled through the wreckage, holding a burned radio. All he could hear was static. By 09:00 a.m., the last drone self-destructed over an empty field, mission complete. Across the front line, silence returned. Uneasy, fragile, deceptive. But this silence was different from the one that began the night. It was heavier, seasoned with realization. Something fundamental had shifted. When Ukrainian soldiers later reviewed the footage, they didn't smile. They watched in silence, as if witnessing the birth of something larger than victory. In war rooms and news studios alike, analysts began to whisper the same phrase, "A new era of warfare has begun." On the ground, medics tended to Russian prisoners of war captured in the chaos near Sevastopol. They offered them water, bandaged burns, and shared rations. The footage circulated online within hours, a quiet reminder that humanity still flickered beneath the noise of machines. In the final broadcast of that day, a Ukrainian spokesperson addressed the world. "This is not a story of conquest," she said. "It is a story of adaptation, how the weak learn to fight the powerful in a language the old world cannot understand." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with exhaustion, above the ruins of Engels. Smoke rose into a pale blue sky. The drones were gone, their fragments scattered like ash over frozen soil. Yet in that silence, the message lingered. The war no longer began with the sound of artillery, but with silence before the swarm took flight, and somewhere in the unseen corridors of the digital world, another line of code prepared to awaken.